All right, so week 5 now. Things are really moving right along, and winter is definitely moving right in. Tonight we're going to talk about credit. Credit is, you're going to hear all sorts of different things. You know, there's some guys who, I guess, on the radio now, on podcasts and the rest of it, that are, you've got to get out from under all your credit. You've got to pay everything off. And they act like credit is a uniform thing. No, there's good credit and there's bad credit. And I'm talking about borrowing money. So, you know, debt and credit sometimes are used synonymously. Now there's also the credit score, and we'll talk about that as well. But anyway, if you understand how to use credit, I can't think of a single person in the world. Well, I mean, I'm sure there's a few, but the vast majority of the people who amass great wealth, and I'm not saying it's all about greed, but anyway, they did so by using credit smartly. Now, people who run up their credit cards and pay, exorbitant consumer interest, that's not using credit smartly. But people who, finance large deals and even finance certain investments when it makes sense, and the ones that it really makes sense with are generally in real estate, can do quite well. And then there's also people who speculate. I mean, there's people I would be scared to death to, used borrowed money to buy, cryptocurrencies on margin is what they'd call that when you're doing that. That's pretty reckless. And the same thing goes with buying stocks like that. And we'll talk more about buying stocks on margin. That's not something I would recommend. If we're talking investing, you're not investing anymore when you're buying stuff on margin. You're speculating, which is fine. I mean, there's a place for that, for discretionary income and limited amounts, but putting vast sums of money in speculation, that's not wise. So, credit funds provided by a creditor. That's the person who's got the money to the borrower, and they're going to calculate an interest. And usually, the interest rates they can be quite low. And essentially, if you think about this more like, when you're renting a car, you pay a certain amount of rent to use that car. Well, the same thing can be true of money. You're taking out a mortgage. You're essentially renting the mortgage companies or the investors who invest in the mortgage company. Anyway, you're renting money. And why do you rent a car? Because the benefit of having the car exceeds the price that you're paying to secure that rental. And the same sort of decision would be true if you're renting money for a mortgage. You want to do that because the value and maybe the investment that you're going to generate, the income you're going to generate, exceeds the amount that you're having to pay to use that money. So, and if you use that sort of logic, then you realize quickly that if it's on a credit card, well, that's not going to work. Or you're just making minimum payments or interest-only payments, and that's that doesn't pass that logic test. So, anyway, different types of credit. Non-installment credit. This is typically done at a higher rate, if there's not a fixed payment, because it usually also lacks collateral. If you go out to Walmart or Target or whatever and buy a bunch of crap and put it on your credit card, that's guaranteed just kind of by your signature, right? If you flake out and don't pay that credit card, it's not like they can come by and there's very little value in the credit card company trying to repossess the towels or the groceries or whatever little crap that you bought at one of those stores. Now, if it's an installment type credit, like for maybe a vehicle or for a house, well then that vehicle, house, whatever that loan is against, it's identified. The VIN is in there. The legal description of the property, the address is in there. There's collateral. That loan is secured because they can very well take your house. It's called foreclosure, or they can very well repossess the car, which is cool. That's what you want. You want deadbeats. You want the people loaning the money to have an enforcement mechanism so their money is not at risk. And because if their money's at risk, they just hike up the interest rate on everybody. So you actually benefit by being able to usually to get a very good rate on a home, or a pretty good rate typically on a vehicle, because there's collateral. They can just come and take it. Whereas credit card interest is going to be super high because they don't have the realistic, credible way to repossess a bunch of random stuff that you bought that's not even identified in the credit card. So anyway, but typically, by definition in this one, installment credit, you've got, a payment that's associated with that vehicle, or you've got a payment that's associated with that house. Whereas with non-installment type stuff, and a credit card would be like this, where it's, sort of a random amount. You can pay the minimum balance, you can pay it off, which you should, or you can just pay some amount in between. So it's just a fuzzier relationship, but the interest rate is going to be typically higher. Now they're going to split this up a little bit more to revolving open-end credit. Yeah, sometimes you can go to a bank. It sounds impressive to have a line of credit, which just means a series of loans, that you could kind of go to and not have to do all the paperwork. To tell you the truth, when I need a loan for business purposes, or a large purchase, more often than not, I will take a loan against my own retirement savings, your 401k, your IRA. It's amazing because the interest rate's quite low. But the other part about that is the interest is paid back to you. So let's say you have, you're doing well, and you got $100,000, $200,000, $800,000, whatever in your retirement savings. Typically, you can borrow up to 50% of that, and sometimes there's an actual cap limit. You're dealing with private companies now and their policies. It's not like there's some federal program. But I've done this before. I mean, I don't want to brag about it, but yeah, I've been driving down the highway and borrowed $20,000, and it was so easy, and there's not a lot of questions because the loan is, you're essentially taking a loan from yourself. And then as you pay that loan back, that goes back in your retirement account. So, and don't confuse this with taking money out of your retirement account in means of some sort of distribution. No, this is a loan that pulls money from your retirement account with the understanding that it's going to go right back in there. If you actually took money from your retirement account and you're not 59 and a half, you've screwed up. Even if you are 59 and a half, it's probably not what you wanted to do. What's going to happen is if you take money from one of those tax-deferred retirement plans before you're 59 and a half, right off you're paying a 10% penalty because you broke the rules. You're not supposed to do that. And then they're going to lump whatever amount you took off right onto your income for that year. So you are going to get a bump in your income. And as you know from, when we talked about tax brackets, that bump is going to be in that highest tax bracket, right? If you're making $100,000, now all of a sudden you're making $110,000, and that, increment at the highest level is the one where you're taking the highest tax bite. But anyway, all sorts of interesting things you can do. But this is where, when I talk about saving for retirement, I've run numerous businesses where I've needed to buy equipment, and not, whatever, $30,000 of equipment plus, it used to be $3,000, and now it's about $10,000 for a truck or a barge or whatever you're doing, depending on how you do it, and maybe 10's exaggerating. Well, actually, I paid about $14,000 for a whole train car of equipment one time. But anyway, you know, different amounts, and all of that was done without a bank, and it wasn't done by me, you know, drawing against other stock market things I had in my personal account. No, I just took a loan against my 401k and paid it back over the course of, you know, 3 to 5 years, whatever the terms were. And I determined what the terms were because, you know, those options are there. You tell them how long you want to pay for it, and it just gets withdrawn from your paycheck. And again, you kind of learn to live within your means, and you know, you just forget about that whatever $800 or $1,000 coming out of your paycheck. And so this assumes that you're, you know, doing all right and you've got your spending under control. But anyway, other options, and that's why I don't use banks for that. But off on a tangent. Advantages of using credit helps build a good credit score. Yeah, whatever. You need a good credit score, but this conscious act of building your credit score, generally you can get when you're in a position, you know, if you can't get credit, it's probably because you don't have the resources to pay it back. And so they're kind of doing you a favor to a certain extent. You know, everybody wants to have, I always wanted to have an American Express card right after I got out of college. It's stupid. It's a vanity card. They make you pay a fee every year, and they don't give you miles. There's really no perks to it. It's not used. Anyway, but they wanted to send you this card. And anyway, I found that, you know, when you want credit, the banks aren't interested in loaning to you, and then when the banks are interested in loaning to you, you don't need their help anymore. You've got other resources. So, you know, if you're trying to start a small business and you're thinking you're going to go to the bank and get a loan, you need to relook at your business plan and talk to some people. This gets kind of beyond personal finance, but banks kind of want sure things, and the failure rate of small business is far from a sure thing, so they're not necessarily your friend. There are other investors and other people and all sorts of crowdsourced stuff going on now, but, you know, that's another thing too. I don't like to do business ventures that are super capital intensive because unless I know they're a proven concept. You know, I've had lots of things that I thought would work great, and there just was no market demand for them. And other things, I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll make a few $100 on this, and then it became a significant line of, you know, sales because people wanted it. So you got to study things. Alaska's so full of opportunities because there's so many good ideas down in the lower 48 that just don't make their way up here. And so you don't have to even be that innovative or bright. All you got to do is just copy something that's a great idea in the lower 48, bring it up here, and you can do all right. Anyway, again, we're off only on the second slide. Eliminates the need for carrying cash and writing checks. Yeah, I like more the accountability part of it. Like I mentioned, I always use credit cards for pretty much everything. Just because when I go to do my taxes at the end of the year and I'm trying to compile expenses, it makes it so much easier. And I tend to have businesses that are related with things that I want to do. So my leisure, you know, expenses and my work expenses are kind of a blur. You know, I like horses, so I've got, you know, whatever, 4 coming up on 5. But, you know, when you're running a farm type thing, a ranch, you can legitimately, if they're adding to the enterprise, you know, feed and all those other things are part of the process. So, disadvantages of using credit. Excessive spending. You know, that's not credit's fault. That's you know, a discipline problem. So, but I play this all the time, too. When people are, say, buying some stuff. I used to sell a lot of horse equipment, stables and stuff like that, and people would want to purchase something, and they'd ask, you know, and I did take credit cards. It was painful because I don't want to pay the 3%. You know, if they're going to write check or cash, I'd gladly take that. But a lot of times, this was where the psychology came through, where you kind of size the person up, and if they want to use a credit card, if they are one of these people who don't really associate credit cards with being actual money, and they're going to spend, $5,000 versus $3,000, well, I'd be foolish not to encourage the credit card. Yeah, I'm not trying to get the people into trouble. I mean, that's the beauty of being involved in horses. The people involved in it can, pretty much afford it. So, but anyway, you'd see people kind of overspend if it's just going on the credit card versus cash, which was quite painful for them. I really kind of like checks, just because I've never had anybody bounce a check on me, and it's pretty easy to deal with. And again, it doesn't quite have the same sensation of handing over a stack of $100 bills. People write a check, and psychologically, I think they do so easier. So, and checks don't have any fees or any cost to me as the seller. So, large accumulation of debt. Yeah, if you start doing that, now that's where credit's not, it's not your friend anymore. All that compound interest that we talked about is now you're on the other side. But, God bless you. You're the person who's making the economy go, because you are paying so much of your income just, pissing away so other people can enjoy the lifestyle at your expense. And again, it's kind of your fault. So don't fall into that trap where the rich bankers are making money off of you paying exorbitant interest rates. There's always going to be laws about credit, people, it wasn't my fault. There's predatory lenders, and there are, but, again, you have to take responsibility for stuff. If you ever buy a house, they have to get you the paperwork by law 3 days ahead of time, but a lot of times it just kind of ends up being this big stack of papers that's shoved in front of you just at closing time. And there's all sorts of documents in there that, explain, in basic terms just how much interest you're going to be paying, but it's kind of water under the bridge at that point. You're committed to the purchase. It is pretty scary, though, to read all those documents, and that's all has to do with, people saying they didn't know, and so there are laws to make sure you do know. And there are other things. There's good things about it where, interest rates are have to be stated in APR, annual percentage rate, rather than some weird rate, so you can compare, loan rates realistically, make valuable apples to apples comparisons rather than, people throwing in, interest calculated on a monthly basis or something that would confuse you. And the credit bureaus. The credit bureaus, we'll talk about them too. They have certain regulations that they have to abide by that you can use to your advantage. So, impact of credit on savings. I mean, if you're doing it smartly, if you're buying a house and you wait and you want to pay cash for it, well, that means you're going to be a renter for a whole lot longer, and you're going to probably, in this market, the inflation's going to come along, and you're probably going to get priced out of the market. So, by not using credit, you're ending up in a worse financial position. Now, if you're doing it for credit cards, that's a whole different thing. So, anyway. But yeah, if you've got regular bills, and this is more like where I'm taking out business loans against my expense, but to tell you the truth, I mean, because it was for a business, it was going to generate more money anyway, so I didn't really see it as going against my savings, since the goal is to, bring in more money. So, credit history, utility bills, cell phone, bills are usually pretty good. Most people need a cell phone anyway. But yeah, you got to pay things on time. Now, just because you're late on a payment doesn't mean that it ends up on the, in the credit bureau. But if you start getting, shut off notices and stuff, yeah, you've definitely crossed the line. But that's just not, you're paying penalties already. You just can't, let those things slide. credit insurance. Yeah, sometimes, you'll get these things from the bank, from the mortgage company, the whatever. Oh, we've got this great plan for you. We're offering you free insurance, and they make it sound like, they're just the best people in the world. Really, what they're trying to do is they're getting you probably to pay for this insurance yourself, and this insurance is going to cover the loan, in case you flake out or die or something like that. So, in essence, I mean, it's not a bad thing to have because, let's say on a mortgage where you've got some, insurance, credit insurance on your mortgage, whereas if you happen to die, that mortgage is paid off. And so the bank is super happy because they don't have to deal with that awkwardness. And your spouse or your significant other, if there's somebody else in the picture, they benefit because the house is paid off. You didn't leave anything, any loose ends. And if you're a younger borrower, that the chances of you actually dying are so remote that the insurance isn't going to be that expensive. So, it's not a bad thing, but they're not necessarily doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They benefit from you having, and them, in essence, also having protection. Credit bureaus. So there's big three, and they're private companies. There is some, regulatory involvement, but since they're proprietary organizations, they want to sell stuff. And in fact, when they're forced by the government to provide credit reports, they don't like giving away stuff for free. And the credit score itself, if that's what you're after, they don't have to give you that. In fact, they won't give you that. Now, maybe you can get it through, your bank or a credit card company, but that's because, your bank or your credit card company is paying the fee or subscribing or whatever and paying that fee for you to get that score. So, again, the score is kind of a nice to have, and you can get, free credit reports 3 times a year, and, more if you're denied credit someplace. But the actual knowledge of the score most of the time is not that important. It's good to have a high score, but tracking it by the day, I get those emails all the time where your credit score's changed. Yeah, whatever. It's a moving target. I'm not getting a loan right now, so I'm good. So right here what they're saying, we're both right. When they say available annually, and I'm saying you get them 3 times a year, that's because there's 3 of these guys, right? So you could go to each one and say, I want a credit report, and they'll have to cough one up. And so that would be, you could go to each one, once a year, so you could get 3 of them if you wanted. Or let's say you're applying for a loan and you think everything's good, and all of a sudden you get denied. And that is a great time, and you have a legal right to say, I want to know why. I want the credit report. What was this decision based upon? And so that's when they have to provide one. So you can get it again. This would be in addition to your 3 per year. But the reason why you want to do that is because if you think you've got good credit and they're denying you credit, maybe there's an error in there. Maybe there's something going on that, could even be the early, indications of identity theft. So you want to be aware of that. This whole test, it's not as straightforward. Hopefully your lives are a little simpler. I've only been married once, but anyway, so I've got one ex-wife. But when I go on there, all these questions are completely, half of the stuff, and this is what makes me question the credit bureaus, is that half of the information, it's like, which one of these addresses did you live at? I was at none of those. But I go, wait a minute, I think my ex-wife lived there, and whatever, been divorced, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years, something like that. And they still got the data kind of commingled and messed up. So these guys are far from perfect. You got to go through it. But anyway, this is just to identify yourself. So they're asking me questions. Obviously I can get my birthday and my social and that stuff. But when they start doing some of these challenge questions, I hope you guys have better luck than I do, because a couple times I've been denied where they think I'm not myself. Anyway, if you've got a bankruptcy or a tax lien, yeah. Now, if you think, oh no, they had to scrub all that information out of there, these people aren't stupid. I mean, if you've got a credit history that's blank for the past 7 years, it doesn't take a rocket science to know that either, A, you're living out in the bush for 7 years, or somebody has a bad credit situation and their records have been cleared. So, it's pretty obvious when there's been a bankruptcy. We'll talk a little about bankruptcy later. Accounts turned over to collection agencies. So yeah, you haven't paid the bills and it's got nastier, between you and the utility, and finally they turned it over to collection agency. Collection agencies are agencies out there that kind of pennies on the dollar. Let's say you owe MasterCard, I don't know the exact figures, but let's say you owe MasterCard, 10 grand, and MasterCard has been hounding you. They know they're not going to get it, so they're like, hell with this. We're going to sell this off to a collection agency for $1,000 or whatever. And, so this Dog the Bounty Hunter type guy, he buys off on it for, buys that debt for $1,000, but he can go after you for the full 10 grand because that's the agreement. So that's where those guys make their money, and that's why they're incentivized, because they bought something for pennies on the dollar, and then they can collect the full amount from you. But good luck. Open and closed accounts. Yeah, you got to be a little smart on this, because you got to realize that even though you've got an account with, say, maybe Old Navy or Gap or somebody, you're probably going to see some small bank in the Midwest, and you're going to have to do a little bit of detective work to figure out that, oh, that's actually my, what, I don't know if Target's got a card, or Kohl's, or whoever, some of those store cards, and you just did it the one time to get a big discount, and you didn't close it. You might want to close it. I open and close Home Depot and Lowe's like at least twice a year. Well, probably not that much, but anyway, they give you like a big discount on the day you open it, and they give you a, 6 days or 6 months to pay, and all this other stuff when you're a new guy, a new customer. Well, if you have an existing card, you don't get that. So, use the card, get your one-time purchase done, and then, after you pay it off, pretty much cancel it. And then next time there's a big purchase you need to make, some appliance, oh, I think I might get the card, and sure enough, they'll get all those perks again. So, but the only way you can do that is having closed it before. I mean, you can get pretty down in the weeds, and it can be quite profitable. I mean, I had a friend who would, if he wanted to buy something from one of those big box stores, he would go and buy the gift cards, because the gift cards had some discount on it. Then he'd take the gift cards and he'd use the military discount, and then he'd put it on the and he just spent his whole day. But he got maybe 25% off all in, so it was worth it to him. But it's kind of wasted the day. This guy doesn't fish, he doesn't hunt, he's just a shopaholic. He had a call sign. I don't want to go in. It's sexist, but it was shops. Was part of the call sign. Anyway, list of companies that have requested your credit. So you'll see this, and that usually coincides with your junk mail. You'll be getting crap mail from Discover Card or whoever, and if you look on your credit report, you'll see that whoever owns Discover Card has been looking at your credit, because they're assessing whether you can pay, and then they start sending you credit card offers or whatever. You can also diminish your credit by asking for credit repeatedly. Like if you go to a dealership, and they always want to kind of get you into some sort of committal type thing, so they'll say, well, let's run your credit. If you let them run your credit a couple, 3 times, your credit score is going to go down through the course of that day. And because to the credit bureaus, all of a sudden it's like, this guy is getting loans, trying to get loans all over town. How much debt is he, ringing up? And so you make those people nervous. And I did the same thing with a I was looking at buying a pretty big excavator, and so it was a fairly large piece of equipment for me, and I was looking at where to get the loan, so I checked with a couple banks and, was shopping rates and all that, but I took it a little too far because I'd filled out a couple credit applications. And finally, I got a letter from the mortgage company saying, hey, do you need a loan? We've got loans and all this other stuff. They were asking me. I'm like, no, I don't need a loan, but I called them up and they said, well, yeah, we're just noticed that you're trying to get loans other places and we just want to figure out what's going on. Are you having troubles? And they were concerned that their mortgage was in jeopardy because they saw my credit score being reduced by me applying for a few more loans. So anyway, so credit bureau, yeah, it's going to have all your personal information on it. The part of the homework is going to be to retrieve your credit report, but by all means do not send it to me. It's not something to be turned in. It's kind of the honor system. Just get a copy of it and take a look at it, just to make sure that number one, you can get in, that they don't have you confused with somebody else, and then go through and just look at everything in there. And it's kind of insightful. There's and it's kind of good where it's kind of like cleaning your room or whatever. You go through and you go, oh, wait a minute, I forgot I had that credit card. I don't use that anymore. And the fact that you don't use it anymore means that it's, something that's out there that could be put at risk. So companies, who have the cards, and usually there's not typically this much information. It'll just say paid, no issues, or something, paid as agreed, or whatever. They don't even care. I don't know that I've seen balances and stuff on them. Usually just has the company and paid. Inquiry, so these are people out shopping to see what's going on. So anyway, it's not going to be a 2-page thing probably. It's going to be a multiple page thing, and depends on what you've done. But if you notice an error in there, then this is where some of the legal things kick in. You can write a letter and protest something, but if you didn't pay your bills and they went to collection, yeah, maybe, and especially for most people getting serious financial troubles because our healthcare system isn't the best. It's usually, somebody's dying of something, and you're like, well, screw it, I'm spending the money on that. I mean, this is no time to conserve money, so people will get themselves in debt. And I guess you could put a letter in there saying, extenuating circumstances due to whatever. But anyway, if you do find something that's in error in there, then you put the credit card company on notice that they have a certain length of time to get that corrected. And they can't use that against you, until the dispute is resolved and things like that. So there's some legal protections that are in there. So credit score. Everybody wants to know what their credit score is. Again, I'm not paying for this. If a bank wants to give it to me, or if I'm doing a loan and they give it to me, but don't, when you go to get your credit report, if you just type into Google, credit report, you're going to get bombarded with a whole bunch of, they may say they're free, but really it's a subscription service, and you give them your credit card, and if you forget to cancel within 30 days, you are paying for it. So there's no real free way to get your credit score other than you're associated with your bank or your actual credit card and they provide it to you, but typically it's not that. I'm not that worried about it, But you want a great credit score, don't get me wrong, but to obsess about it and check it like the weather is kind of ridiculous. You will, if you have a higher credit score, you represent less risk to the lender, and so, you will get the best rate that they have available. So you should work on building the credit score, but tracking it all the time, especially if you're paying for it, that's kind of counterproductive, because they'd be more impressed if you had, more money and the rest of that. Can't affect interest rate. True. These guys are flat guessing. The credit bureaus, they have their proprietary algorithms, whatever you want to call it, and they're not sharing that. And they're not necessarily working for you. They're working for the merchants who subscribe to them, who are assessing people's credit. So they want to put the most useful data in there. They want to, if they give somebody an 800 on their credit score, then the propensity of that person being a dirtball is very, very low. So they're concerned about accuracy to protect the merchants that are the people, paying their bills, paying for their service. So they want to make sure their stuff is good. But yeah, new credit, you can see if you go through and you do a whole bunch of loans, you could lose a little bit. Credit history, credit utilization. If you don't use credit at all and you have a ton of money, you may not have a super high score. But again, to take out loans when you don't need them to improve your credit score is, again, kind of counterproductive. Credit payment history, though, that's going to be the largest one. Yep, they won't. They're different. So 350 to 800, 600. Below 600, you're not getting the good loans. And again, if you see some place that says we finance anybody, well, you're not anybody. If they're financing anybody, that means that built into their prices, built into their loans, is the fact that they're financing deadbeats, which is a great deal if you're a deadbeat and you need financing. But if you're somebody who pays their bills on time, that place is going to be more expensive to you because you're having to shoulder the burden for paying all these people who don't pay their bills. So you want places that are pretty exclusive, and have a very low rate for their best customers, meaning the ones with the highest credit score. So anyway, about correcting those mistakes, yep. If they have something inaccurate, and they got to figure it out within 30 days. So improving your credit score, catch up on late payments, yep, reduce debt. Yeah, they don't want to see a lot of debt out there, but you don't want a lot of debt out there. This is good. Late payments, there's usually a charge associated, and if you got a whole bunch of debt, mortgage debt, they may not give you too much grief on. But if you got a huge amount of credit card debt, they realize you don't get it, and you're paying a whole lot of interest, and you're probably not a good budgeter. You're probably not somebody who's going to, fulfill the loan. So your credit score is going to go down. Destroy credit cards by keeping it. I don't see the logic in that. Now, I do have a credit card that I don't use, but that's because it's associated with the bank that I have checking with, and I want the overdraft protection. Call creditors unable to make payments. Yeah, if you ignore people, and calling creditors mean what? I realize people text and people. It was literally, this is funny, I spent 4.5 hours with the IRS last Thursday just on a variety of holds from business taxes from 2018 and 2017. I mean, it's anyway, any kind of phone service, but the IRS is just so large that they just literally lose things, and so. Anyway, that's a whole different subject. But if you've called anybody, it's a pretty painful experience because unusually high call volume. That might be a thing, but when you say it every day for 3 years in a row, it's not unusual. That's standard. So maybe email, maybe other things, but communication is the key. And there's actually even credit counselors that are with the credit card companies. And they're not actually the worst people in the world, as opposed to the .com kind of guys who are like, oh, we can get you out from under your credit card debt. No, what they're probably going to do is you're going to end up with another credit card debt to that company, and it's just those companies. There's a lot of scams out there. Deal with the bank itself or deal with the creditor itself, and just say, hey, this happened, that happened. And what may happen is they may put you in a different type of loan. If you've got a huge credit card debt and you're just making minimum payments because the interest rates are so high, what they may say is, they may say, look, this isn't working out. We're going to, cut back on your credit card. We're going to put this loan, all this money that you've got us, we're going to restructure it into an installment type loan, and you're going to make regular monthly payments at a lower interest rate, and that way, there's kind of light at the end of the tunnel rather than you making minimum payments. And since it's an installment type loan, like I talked about from the get-go, is that, a lot of times those things have lower interest rates. They just want their money. And like I said, if this thing goes to collection, they sell off your $10,000 debt for $1,000, that's not a good deal for them. So if they can get all their money back over a longer period of time, and maybe even keep you as a customer, they've got some motivation. There's, they're I wouldn't say they're necessarily your partner, but they definitely have an interest in your financial future, as opposed to you flaking out or declaring bankruptcy or something like that, which is kind of a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Reviewing your credit report. So twice a year is what they're saying. Make sure it's accurate. And after you've done it a couple times, it doesn't take that long. Yeah, see what kind of information. And it's kind of interesting too, see how many times your credit score has been run. When you don't think it damages your score, sometimes there are actions you do that do damage it. Most people, over half are above 700. So it's really, these folks that are, they were saying 600 was a good score. That just means that there's this very small, 15% or below. You want to be, in the upper 50%, so you're getting the better loan rates and not having things called into question. So this is how you do it. If you want a credit report, you go to ftc.gov. Now, the government doesn't do the credit reports, but if you use this as the place to launch from, then you're good to go, because then they can direct you. We'll step through that in just a second. There's also, like I said, some of these companies, Credit Karma and other people, will provide you with your score and all that other stuff. But if they're doing it for free, when you're getting something for free, you might have become the product. Your information may be what is of value to them, and then they sell that on to third parties. If you're fine with that, and you don't mind a few more emails or some other solicited stuff or a little bit of privacy, maybe it's worth it to you. But if you just want the straight credit score, we'll see if we can get there. Come on, dude. Control. It's going to go. Okay, so here's, credit score, credit alerts, get your free. So we're on a .gov site, ftc.gov, right? And it goes through kind of the rules about credit reports, how to get them, Okay, yeah, all I want is a credit report. So it goes through some of the things about, how to do it. I guess you can do it in writing if you like. But anyway, now you're going to get a redirect to the .com site. And they're going to tell you, yep, you're leaving the government site. But now you're at the one that's owned by the three guys. And this is the one that obviously they're not making money out of it. This is a mandated thing. And so you go through there and, you crush your free credit report and then pick the report, and you start filling out details. Now, if you go, free credit report, just on regular old Google, you're going to get, oh yeah, 100%. So Credit Karma's right at the top. Here you're going directly to Experian, and it's going to be free, but gives your credit card for why if it's free, do I need to give you my credit card? And then you get all the ones that where this is their business model. It's just kind of overwhelming. And the .gov site's probably a little bit better. But these other guys, and they're going to stress the importance of getting your credit score. See, get your free credit and FICO score. And, for some people, that's really what they want is that score. And anyway, there's no free lunch. So, done with that. Identity theft. This is just, my God, I'm driving down the road again, and I get a text from Wells Fargo telling me my $5,000 transfer from my checking account to my credit card has been denied. And it comes to me on my phone. And this wasn't, even the scammer people. This was actually Wells Fargo legitimately. So I call Wells Fargo to try and get this thing squared away. Well, the first thing I want to know is my account number. Well, I don't have an account with Wells Fargo. This is so far down the rabbit hole that I couldn't even get to the bottom of it because I couldn't identify myself because the person who established these fake accounts had, done so with all their information. I had to go down in person to pretty painful process, but they legitimately, somebody had established a checking account and was trying to get a credit card all in my name without my knowledge. And if you let those things go, once in a while they do get through. So you're going to have identity theft. And this is where also you have to check your credit card balances because you'll see all these stray charges. And if you don't catch it pretty quickly, within a few days, it just gets nastier. If you let it go over 30 days, you're just kind of negligent by law, and you may be on the hook for the charges. If you catch it before they've actually paid the merchant, then it can be a great thing. They're very friendly. The longer you wait, the credit card companies get more and more difficult, especially if they forwarded the money. So, maybe acquired identity theft impacts about 15 billion. The other reason for using credit cards sometimes too is as opposed to cash. For instance, my daughter, when she was going to school in the South, she was down at Atlanta Airport and took a taxi, and she used a credit card, and the guy, for literally a 3-mile ride, charged her $50 on the credit card. And had she paid in cash, she would have been screwed. She probably should have questioned a little bit more. But anyway, she called me up right after it happened, and, she was still not that old at the time, so I called the credit card company and then I guess she had a call as well. But anyway, that was obviously a fraudulent charge for too short of ride, and the guy had just charged it, so it takes a few days for the credit card company to send the merchant, in this case, the money. So they absolutely had no problem canceling this whole thing. Turned out the guy too who actually had the credit card or the taxi thing, he had died many years ago, so the taxi guy was actually impersonating somebody else. It could have gone so much worse. So I was happy that she got through the situation, but by having used the credit card, I did have some protection. And I was in Croatia last year as well. Got screwed on a hotel deal. Had I paid in cash, I would have been stuck. Hotwire was the merchant involved, and they're horrible in terms of customer service. They were said, no, we're not refunding it. It's not our problem. And I actually went back through, I guess it was Visa in this case. They just denied the charges, and so whatever, I got the money back. So there are advantages to using certain things, but identity theft itself, yeah, it's it gets more and more creative. all the time. Now, again, the book and these slides are kind of old school, where people are dumpster diving and going through your mailbox, and most things now are done electronically. So the level of scam is so much further up there in terms of phishing and the rest of it. But I don't think that I've really lost money on identity thefts. I've lost a lot of time getting them corrected, but if you're expeditious about going after it, you can, 600 hours dealing with damage control certainly could happen. Identity theft can be fairly small to incredibly high amounts. So this whole physical, shoulder surfing and dumpster diving, any more statements and things like that don't typically have the full credit card number on there. You're much more likely, to have this done electronically. Skimming's pretty interesting. That's where they use your credit card number. This happens a lot with ATMs as well. Anybody, it doesn't matter if you've got an Alaska USA account, but that just sort of seems to be a thing where you get these bogus text messages, but they're just so, whatever. Any of these deals where you didn't initiate the question. In fact, I had a legitimate company call me last week, and it was about, some unusual activity on my credit card company, or on my credit card, and they said, okay, for identification purposes, we need your social security number. It's like, no, you don't. Not if you're calling me. I will call the bank back, at a number that you don't give me, that I actually, have used before, is on the credit card, or I get online or whatever, that I know is legitimately the bank. But unless you initiated the call, do not offer any personal information, because, and this thing was actually the bank, and I said, I'm not giving you my social because I didn't initiate the call. And she said, oh, yeah, not a problem, just call us back. And that's what I did. So fishing, farming, whatever. These people are one step ahead. So if you learn about all these tactics right now, they're not going to be, the ones that are going to be employed against you. Some of the good ones will stick around. Phishing's always a good one. But violating your mailbox, most people have gone paperless. It's just so much easier. So, protect yourself against identity theft. Usually not on. Most people don't have their social security number on there. Knowing what you had. Like if you're going to do some travel, it doesn't hurt to kind of pull out the contents of your wallet and photocopy it. So if your credit cards are missing and you've got, several of them, you've got kind of front and back, you've got the account numbers and you've got the phone numbers for the companies. Shredders. I don't write enough checks to worry about it. Phone directories, all that stuff's. Anyway, most of the new crime is going to be electronically done. Most all sites are secured now. Personal information, certainly. Look at your bank accounts. That's good. Be careful. That's just the way it's done anymore. Delivery schedules. Personal checks. Again, I don't have that many personal checks around. I don't think too many do. Most people do direct deposit. So, I came in the military at a time where they said to label all your items with your name and your social security number, and I still have maybe a couple old cameras and some stereo equipment, literally with my name and my social security number engraved on them. I mean, not only does the thief now have, my stereo, but they also have my social security, so you got to use some common sense. Identity theft insurance. Every time there's a big data breach, they'll say, oh, we're going to offer you some protection. This stuff is, maybe people have better experience with it. I mean, if you had some sort of, card lock or something like that, but most of the free ones or pseudo free ones, they'll notify you of the identity theft when you noticed it, maybe a week before. So maybe it's not a bad backup, but I don't know. The other thing that I've found, I absolutely do not use autocomplete on my email passwords or any of my accounts anymore. I don't know whether it was Apple or Google or whoever had it, but and I didn't have bank accounts on passwords maybe auto completed, but once they had your email password, then they got in and they got to your whole password list, and they can kind of figure it out that most people aren't that creative. And anyway, once I kind of took all of that stuff offline, I'd say in the past year or so, I haven't had many issues. So immediate action. Contact the police. The boys at the crime lab, they really don't care. This is the Big Lebowski. They're not going to be searching for your rug. But again, sometimes there is a necessity to get a police report, which is a joke. You go down there, and you pay them $15, and they give you your police report, and then you send it off to the company, and because that's one of their checklist items before they can, acknowledge your identity theft, is that you made a formal police report. FTC, again, after spending 4.5 hours with the IRS, I'm not holding these guys in great esteem. Any of those 3-letter agencies. Or contact credit reporting could be important, and be careful though. You can, essentially get your credit completely locked down. So sharing a little bit of information with them, or pointing out potential identity theft. But you don't want to have all your credit cards all of a sudden quit working. You need to limit the damage. But notifying those people is prudent. Anyway, you could look all these up online when the time occurs. There's 3 of them, and the big 3: TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. Okay, so managing your credit. I don't know how we're going long here. Anyway, kind of redundant. I think we've talked about all of that. Yep. There's an identity theft video that sometimes gets... I'll try and put it in again. It's a great video. It's from the UK. It's about guys using credit card skimmers. When I lived in Spain, it was amazing. You go up to all these, I guess they were Cajero Automático or whatever, Geldemats in Germany. Anyway, all kinds of ATMs and fake ones. Some of them were just boxes. And you put your credit card in, and it'd come up with a... My Spanish isn't good, but no funciona, and out of order kind of message. So you slide your credit card in, or your ATM card in, you type in your PIN, and then the thing comes back with out of order. That's all that machine does. It's not an actual ATM. All they've done is read your magnetic strip, got you to turn in your PIN, and by the time you can get to the next ATM, they've run that account. Or other ones will have these small little cameras and take a picture of you punching in the PIN and also get the magnetic strip data. There's all sorts of different ways to do it, but they can definitely rip you off. We know about compound interest, so I'm not going to belabor the point. What works out so well for you in terms of saving money can also work out just the same way in terms of costing you money. Inflows, outflows, credit check. Yep, we talked about credit reports. Income, existing debt level. Yep. Again, a lot of times these credit card, I don't shop at, say, Kohl's or whatever, but if you're not using their credit card, you're paying a premium. They have all kinds of incentives to get people to do it. And the same with, the big box stores, if you're not using the credit card, you're actually paying a little bit more because they have all of those incentives for their credit card holders. So doesn't mean you need to keep a balance. Doesn't mean you need to pay any finance charges. But if you want the best deal, sometimes you got to use them. So most people, especially in Alaska, are kind of driven by the perks. Some people want the cash back kind. These are the general ones, the most popular ones, and then you have some of those proprietary cards, Gap, Kohl's, whatever. A lot of companies have their own. It used to be more popular. Now it's just kind of a waste and makes your wallet too fat, gives you a bad back from sitting on it. But pick one of these, probably one of these two, and look at the perks, look at the rates, and also keep in mind too, if you are doing it for perks and miles, don't be wooed by some, we'll give you 50,000 free miles. Well, miles are not a universally recognized denomination. Sometimes 50,000 miles won't even get you to Seattle with some of the cards, whereas other cards 10,000 miles will get you to Seattle. So you got to kind of know your cards and what their programs are like. Credit limit. If you approach the credit limit for some big transaction or whatever, usually just calling the bank and saying, "Hey, I need I've got a big purchase. I need to do this." I'm not saying to. I've never done it because my credit was out of control. I've done it because I wanted to, number one, I made sure the vendor wasn't going to pass along the credit fee to me. But if I'm I bought a big saw, big sawmill. It's like 20 grand, and I could use those miles, and they weren't charging a fee, but I already had something on the credit card, so I just called them up and said, "Hey, will you up the limit?" And sure enough, they do, and I get all the miles, so that works out. Overdraft protection. Accidents are going to happen, and you don't want a whole bunch of extra money in your account to prevent this from happening. If you can use overdraft protection and keep less money in your checking account, that's pretty smart. You generally shouldn't have to pay an annual fee unless there's a lot of mileage or something associated with that card. Incentives to use. So these prestige cards, I used to have a really cool metal card, but it was just not a good rate, and it had an annual fee, and anybody who's really impressed by that is whatever, probably a little shallow. Grace period. So this is what you're doing by when you don't want to pay the credit, the finance charge. You just have to pay the balance off within the grace period. So generally within that statement closing date. And if you do that, you're a convenience user. You're not paying to use that credit card. The merchant's paying like 3%. They're still making money, but they'd like to make money off of both sides. They like to have the merchant pay, and then they like to also have you pay. But anyway, they can set it up however they want. Favorable to users. Yeah. But again, you'll see them located in states where their rules don't apply. Look at your credit cards. They're probably out of North Dakota, maybe Delaware. That's because politicians there have tried to attract those financial services companies, and so they have lax regulations. Cash advances, there is no grace period on cash advances. I one time did get ripped off. This is when I had a credit card bill mailed to me, and they had those convenience checks, which are horrible. Anyway, somebody did get in my mailbox and took those things out, and they wrote a check for $300 on one of those bogus check things. Well, it didn't take much to get it undone, but one of the things they did was my credit card was billed $330 because there was a 10% fee for doing the cash advance, and then the interest started the day that they wrote that thing. So cash advances, there is no grace period. There's usually a fee associated with them, and just don't get your ATM and your credit card confused. Finance charge, so we talked about that. different ways of doing it. Usually it's the daily balance, whatever. But what you want is you want to use the grace period, and you want to get it paid off so that these interest rates and their method of calculating their interest don't apply to you. So you have to read your statements. APR. So APR is what the world runs on. Anybody who's quoting in some other interest rate is, well, most times it's illegal. You know, there's laws that mandate that APR is the common term used so that you can make comparisons. Yeah, this is interesting though. You know, like I was saying, and again, this is an aggressive thing, but you know, for me, having a mortgage out on a couple of properties, I don't see that as a bad thing. I see when inflation and because they're at low interest rates. If interest rates are going up, if I'm having to pay the current interest rate, yeah, I'm not at all happy. But if I've got money under loan and inflation's screaming away, that is kind of, inflation is actually sort of a perk, since the money that I'm paying back is fixed and reduced. You know, all the indexes, all the amount I can charge for things, and my income, that's stuff that's tied to cost of living type of adjustments, that will go up, and the portion of my mortgage will actually go down. Depends on the length of period. So again, don't use credit cards to finance large amounts of debt. If you're going to do that, take out an actual loan, an installment loan for the item, and you will not be paying those double-digit rates that credit cards have associated with them. So again, more stuff about how interest rates are going to go up, and it's going to get painful. Just don't do it. So the first thing you want to look at is write down a finance charge. Anytime you get a bill, make sure there's no finance charge. And if there is a finance charge, then why did this happen? Did I carry a balance? Did I get the payment in late? Ideally, you don't want a finance charge. And then you go through and you look at all your purchases. There shouldn't be any cash advances. That's not financially sound. You want to look at payments, obviously. Yeah, they'll usually suspend things. When you find errors on there, they come right off. Now, if they end up siding with the merchant, which usually I've never had that happen. Anyway, they, because legitimately, when I report fraud, it's fraud. Sometimes you will get some, innocent errors where you're like, I never spent that, and you find out that the merchant identified as something that you absolutely didn't recognize. Or there's pending charges that kind of go away, like when you go to a hotel or something, and they, put some pending charge out there for incidentals. But if those things actually post, yeah, you gotta go after them. Customer service numbers, yep. But yeah, I've done this so many times, and actually the phone service, I think, is the way that I've got it resolved just about every time. But what happens is, you report the suspicious charges, they take them off your statement, and then, I don't know, 3, 4, 6 weeks later, you get a letter saying, yeah, this was bogus. What they want to do is they want to stop any sort of damage from continuing. And usually they want to, if it's truly identity theft, they want to cancel that card and issue you a new one. So you got to use your own judgment on this. But I've been on a trip before when I saw something, I'm like, ooh, okay, I saw this just happen. I noticed there's some bogus charges on there. Let me put some gas in my tank and make sure I'm all good to go because, I'm going to lose this credit card the minute I report it. And then also when they say, okay, we'll have you a new credit card out in a week or two, I don't do that. I'm like, can we expedite that? And I don't know. I don't think I've got that great a credit or I'm that special to them, but they will usually overnight it if asked, and it just makes life so much easier. So, some more credit card stuff. But there are some pretty good protections built in on credit card as opposed to debit cards that are more done with the individual banks, their own policies. All sorts of laws. But the disclosures and the other things. Yeah, if you're investing money but you're carrying a balance, yeah, there's no legitimate investment you're going to get without exposing yourself to a lot of risk, which again is not investing, it's into speculation. So yeah, get your credit card bills paid off and then start investing. Credit repair services. So don't confuse this with the bank. Call the bank, and if they recommend that you talk to, their people, that may not be a bad thing. But if you see some, internet ad or TV ad saying, we can get you out from under your credit card debt, they're probably just going to give you one more debt. So this debt consolidation loan is valid, and I've kind of referenced that before. If you're carrying a bunch of debt on your credit card, just doing the minimum balances, call them, and they may recommend that they put it under a different type of loan at a lower interest rate. You're not going to have the same flexibility. They may lower your credit limit, but maybe that's something what you need to do. Some of these other things, are kind of short-term solutions. Especially borrowing money from family members. You can only go to the well so many times. What it really gets back to is, learning to live within your means. Bankruptcy, a couple different ways to do this. If you do bankruptcy, though, what you essentially do is you go to the court and you say, look, I'm just not good with money. I'm a flake. I need some parental figure to intervene, and that's literally what they're doing. They may have you write up everything you own and everybody you owe money to, and then they get to go through and say, yeah, your car, we need to get rid of that, your stuff, this needs to happen, that needs to happen. And you're like, well, wait a minute, but I really like no, you went and you told them you're not good, and you gave them control, so they can make the calls. That you've got the court involved. Now the other thing, this chapter 13, they may allow you to keep some of your stuff, especially if it's like a vehicle that's going to get you back and forth to work. So this is more like a wage earner kind of plan. But you're like, you know what? I'm going to flake it. I'm just going to declare bankruptcy and stiff all my creditors. I did promise to pay all those loans, but yeah, I'm not doing that anymore. I just want to walk away. You do that under Chapter 7, and you're probably going to find, a few years into it that you might regret that. If you go to the court and you still have that attitude that I don't want to pay, I just want to walk away from it, they may say, well, you're still working. You're going to pay these people back. And so we're just going to take control, and you're going to come up with a way to pay these people back, and we're going to force you to do it. So, Chapter 13's maybe a little bit better, but either one, you've given up control. You've admitted to the court that you need somebody else to take control, and when they start telling you what to do, you may not like it, but you don't have a choice, and your credit history is trashed. So trying to dig out from under that hole. It may seem like a quick solution, but it's probably pretty painful. Anyway, so again, they're just talking about credit like all credit's universal. You know, I don't know. I keep thinking about some ways that credit can be used that are useful. It's not your enemy. Not being able to use it properly, that's where it gets destructive. So this is going to be the homework. So to reiterate, people still had a few questions last week on the banking problem. Yeah, that's not in the book. You're just doing that from scratch. You're independently picking your banks and you're going to do the evaluation. For this week, you're going to just have this simple problem, this problem 8. But also go to that other site, and again, do not turn this in. This is only for your use. Anyway, go ahead and try and retrieve your credit report and just take a look at it. It's maybe, insightful. And at least you'll learn how to do it. And yeah, maybe clean up a few items or just verify what's on there and just become a little bit more literate on how that whole thing's done and why certain advertisements show up in your mailbox and what to look out for. And you think you're in deep trouble because you were late with a utility bill a couple months ago, and you'll more than likely look on there and says everything's paid in full because you didn't let it get as bad as you thought. They didn't shut off the power, they didn't put it into collection. So sometimes some of that's good news. So anyway, give that a look. All right, till next week.